Well, good morning and welcome to our LammTech webinar, Security for the Remote Home User. I'm Doug Sokolowski and I'm the account manager for LammTech, and we thank you for joining us. Before we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping items to review. First off, to let everyone know everybody is muted, so there's no background noise. We will have a Q&A window that is available for use for any questions or comments that you may have during the course of this. In addition to introducing our guest, I'll also serve as the moderator. Our LammTech marketing manager, Courtney Hicks, will also pose the questions or comments to our presenter to ensure you get your answer, or at least be monitoring the questions that you may have. There will also be time available after the webinar to ask questions, and we'll either answer them during the webinar or set up a time to answer your specific questions. We do not have a poll this morning, but we do like to see your questions or thoughts. You can contact the information we provided at the end of the webinar for you to get in touch with us at LammTech. In addition to our live webinar, we'll provide a link to the recording should you want to review what you learned today or want to share your knowledge with another person in your organization, or even want to show someone that you may want to refer LammTech to. So without further ado, let's get started. Give you a little history and information today about LammTech. We were founded by Robert Lamm in 1999 in Sedalia. Robert still serves as our owner today. We'll actually be hearing from him today too. We provide managed services for businesses and organizations, with our core coverage area being in between Kansas City to Columbia, and then from Brunswick to Springfield. However, we do service several other states and regions with clients that have businesses there. LammTech aligns IT solutions with your growth initiatives. Our overall goal is to take care of your technology so you can focus on that day-to-day business that you guys do so well and stop expanding your problems. We offer managed services to maintain your security, which we'll talk about today, help desk support, consulting, and also data recovery and backup services. One other note before we introduce our speaker: for those of you joining us today that are current clients of LammTech, we do appreciate your partnership. We do believe you'll learn more about protecting your business and how we assist with that. If you have questions on what you learned today and how it works with your specific agreement and for your place of business, feel free to reach out to our team after the webinar is complete. Now, those of you who have joined us and for some of our webinars in the past, we do appreciate your interest in learning more to improve and enhance your business strategy. Today, we're going to discuss a topic that's been really on the minds of many, and it's how to work from home or remote location, and not only have the capability to do it, but how do you do it securely? How do you securely share files? There's so many more topics with that, but it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, who discuss the best practices for you and your staff to work from remote location and home. He's the owner and CEO of LammTech, Robert Lamm.
Hi, Doug. Good morning. Thanks for everybody for taking the time to join us this morning. As Doug has said, this has become a very important topic. It's always been kind of important, important in our mind and with our clients, that we talk a lot about security, but it's become ever more important. Just for a sense of more and more people have found themselves working from home. And, it's important today because so many people are using their homes as a true office rather than just a kind of a watering hole where they go in and check their email and maybe update a spreadsheet and then go about doing things at home. You're actually parked there doing your work. As a service provider, we focus a lot on security. We evaluate and help our clients evaluate their level of risk, whether you're at home or at your office. With the advent of home and remote working, it has become more and more a focus for everyone. We've got a lot of topics that we're going to talk about today: internet connectivity, endpoint protection, your home network, your applications that you use, whether they're online or local, cloud sharing versus cloud storage. But the one important element that ties it all together is securing all of those. And oftentimes when I have this discussion with clients and with friends, The focus always wants to be around, well, your PC that you're using at home. And while it's important that that is a key ingredient because that's what you're touching, there are so many other influences that can impact and be detrimental if not caught or safeguarded against to your network at home, your office network, and of course your work product as well. When we were working at home to begin with, it was really kind of generally accepted that the only thing that people were really worried about was your internet performance. Man, my internet's slow. I can't bring up my email fast, browsing slow, a number of things that all revolved around just performance. That was followed by reliability. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere when it comes to technology and internet. Some of us are fortunate enough to have high-speed broadband internet if you live in town. But when you start reaching the outskirts of town and get out to our rural communities, we rely on things like wireless connections and some even satellite dishes and things like that. And so that always kind of stays at the forefront that, people are, unhappy because they get dropped from their connections and things like that. But the reality of it is those really are secondary to what we need to be concerned about today. When people started in home, remote working isn't something that's new, but because of everything that's been happening in the world today within the last 6-8 months, it has really kind of jumped up in front of everybody. Everybody was forced to work from home. And what we saw even prior to this were companies that had servers called terminal servers that you could connect to from home, and you open up a session just like you're sitting at work, and boy, it worked great. However, some of the inherent security vulnerabilities that were there with this connection called an RDP connection at times used to be considered a secure connection, but our ransomware criminals out there discovered that there was some flaws in that, and they were able to take advantage of that and introduce ransomware into networks. Fortunately, most companies that are using terminal server type environments have clamped down on that and have put additional safeguards in. But it's those kind of things that we focus on the way you connect to the office that is important, and that's what we're going to talk about today. This busy looking picture that you have in front of you describes all or depicts all of the elements that we look at: your office, the internet, the connection to your home and your endpoint. That's a fancy word for either your firewall or the router that is provided, and then your home and all the different devices. So in those terms, let's talk about the connectivity and the endpoint part of it. So we've talked a little bit about what to expect from your internet connection. Of course, we see things that, people they're not sure who to blame or who to go to if their internet seems slow or it drops off. More recently, a misunderstanding of how things like video conferencing. I'm sure a very good abundance of people today in our session have either used Zoom or Teams or GoToMeeting, some form of connection to collaborate with your coworkers or with clients. We do here a lot. We spent 90 plus days working from home. We had 18 people that every morning we would have meetings, huddles, team huddles, departmental huddles, and they were all video based. And we learned a lot. We were fortunate that we're a bunch of techies, and so that was a little bit in our favor. But there's a lot of things to consider that we work with our home clients, because if you think about the types of connections that you have, whether it's something like charter cable or wireless internet or DSL, there's a lot of influences that will impact the speed of your connection, how reliable it is, even the security aspect of it as well. And one of the major things that we focus on is the endpoint, this little box over here to the right that is depicted as a firewall, but it's also a router. And the internet provider that you choose oftentimes provides you a box. Keep in mind, you have a residential connection. And so the internet provider is going to most likely provide you a box either as part of the service or at a modest fee. And most of them will tell you that, hey, this is just a disclaimer. This is just to make a good connection, but we really want you to have antivirus on your PCs. Well, the antivirus will help you to some point, but oftentimes we will see, we'll call them the bad actors. They scour the internet looking for these types of boxes at your home. And then they also are going to compare, and they can actually most times tell what kind of device that is. So if it's a device that you purchased at your local big box store, whether it's Walmart, Staples, Best Buy, any of those, you can buy all these different types of routers, Linksys, Netgear. It's a big long list. They all have their pros and cons, but the most common thing that they all advertise is what? It's plug and play. It's easy. The problem with easy is that twofold. It's easy because it's plug and play, which means you can just plug it into your internet connection, turn the power on, and then all of a sudden you have wireless. You can connect with their default wireless password, which by the way is most likely on the underside of the box with a label. And all you have to do is type that into your phone, your iPad, your computer, and you have a connection. Those are typically random and they're not usually the same on every box. However, the passwords to administrate those boxes are all the same. They call it a default password for a reason. And if you don't believe me, go home and look under your router. If it's an SMC, Belkin, Netgear, something that you may have bought from a store and put it in yourself, look at the model number and then go on Google and then do a Google search. Do something like, if let's say it's a Netgear, whatever the model number is, just type in Netgear, the model number, and the phrase default password and see what comes up. That'll tell you how quickly and how, it'll tell you quickly just how secure they are. So those are just some really quick exercises that you can do to see. Doug, we got something?
We have a question talking about a little bit your initial, talking about working from home is, how do these bad people find homes with these easy routers?
Well, that's a very good question. And it is amazingly easy. If you're a little, most of these bad actors are, I don't know how I would describe them, technical criminals. They're really smart. And you can find tools that you can run on your PC and point it out to the internet and tell it to crawl the internet. So then what it does is it tries to just seek out the addresses for your routers. And so when it finds one, it'll just make a list. So then what they do is they create this list, they put it in another program and say, okay, go to address number 1, scan it, see what you can find about it. And if it determines that it's an SMC router, then it tries to use the SMC default password to see if it can access it. If it can't, it moves on. But if it can't, it flags it. And so then later they can come back through and then try to hack it and gain access to your internet. Once they get on one of those, your home router, they can create their own set of rules within that router depending on how complex it is and or how powerful that router is, to where they can actually open up doorways into your network. And if you've already got a connection to your office, then effectively they're coming in the doorway to your office through your home.
We have a follow-up to that, Rob.
Sure.
It says the IT associated with my router at home suggested not to change the default password. Is there a reason they would suggest this?
I cannot understand a reason why. I would not envision one excuse to not change that unless they're being managed by that company. And then if that company is managing it, then they should have changed the password themselves. I completely disagree with that. So again, I guess I should have prefaced this that what I'm talking about today is based on our experience and also my experience in this world of IT. It's like many other things. There's more ways to skin this cat than you can imagine. So there's never one set prescribed way, but there are some things that are somewhat foundational. And changing default passwords, if you ask most anyone in our business and in our industry, that is one of the cardinal rules, is never leave a default password on anything. So, endpoint connection. We haven't even gotten to your home network, but all of a sudden we've generated some questions, and they're very good, because this, I think, gets people thinking that we're not just working on our PC from home, we're an extension back to our home office. So let's talk a little bit about your home network. I have a lot of content, and I'm going to try to squeeze it in. If I go a little fast, we can always come back to it. But it's important to understand what makes up your home network. Now, I've grayed out what we've already talked about. This doesn't look very complicated, does it? Because all I've done is identified what you use when you're working from home. And I've kind of created this list based on what I've experienced, what our folks here have experienced, what our clients have experienced, that when they found themselves working from home, I mean, I realized that, hey, I needed a little hand scanner because there are certain things that I get that I need to scan to save into our system. But let's talk first about who's on your home network. You know, it's not just you. If you've got kids, if you have company who comes in, you have family members who travel in from out of town, most of them have phones or tablets. Some even carry notebooks. And what's the first thing they ask if they haven't been to your house before? Hey, what's your Wi-Fi password? So that takes us to the second component. What's on your network? We've got PCs and tablets. We've got streaming devices. So think about this for just a second. It's surprising to discover how many items in your household actually are network connected. You know, you might be surprised if you were to try to collect or document all those. Think about your Rokus, your Amazon Echoes, Amazon Fires, internet radios. If you've got a Sonos or even the stereo receivers today come internet connected. If you have smart home devices, you know, those cool Nest doorbells, the Ring doorbells, Google Nest. If you have Samsung smart things where you can turn lights on and off and things like that, security cameras. All of these things are a long laundry list, and I'm not even talked about personal computers or anything that's really computer related. If you start getting into that area, then let's talk about PCs, laptops, printers, if you have a voice over IP phone that connects back to your office, tablets, smartphones, even watches. All of these items connect to that same internet connection that's going out to the world. So, I'm kind of a self-admitted geek. I have a little device that keeps track of all those items on my network. I have 117 IP addresses or 117 devices on my home network. So, I mean, you rack up 2 or 3 smart TVs. Each one of those has a Roku box on it. It doesn't take long for those to add up. So, and also keep in mind that each one of these items, however minuscule they appear, present some kind of a risk. Some are greater than others, and you just need to know what's on your network so you can try to mitigate those risks.
Ron,
Yes, ma'am.
we have a question.
Yes.
What would you suggest if you find devices using your internet that do not belong to you or that you recognize, such as TVs and tablets?
Well, and that's that's a pretty good question. So, and it gets a little complicated, but I'll give you the high level of it. So, we all used to joke years ago, sometimes still recently, about how, well, if my internet was slow, I would just log on to my neighbor's because I have his username and password. And some of that still exists. I mean, I've seen times that I've been with people when traveling when they say, well, I don't have a good internet connection or a way to get connected, but hey, here's a wireless network I think I can connect to. It shows open, and they just jump right on it and connect to it. So if you discover something like that, depending on the type of home router that you have, some of them have the capability to go in and block that device. So one thing to know, and this is pretty simple, one thing to know about looking at an IP address, that's Internet Protocol address, that's that one that you see that's like 192.168. That's as technical as I'm going to get, by the way. If you see something like that that's in your list of router, on your router list, or that shows up, if you can get into your router and find out what the machine address is, so I kind of fibbed, I do have one more little technical tidbit. Each device that connects to the network has its own unique identification. It's called a MAC ID, machine address. You can go to your router, find that machine address and say block it, and then it won't be able to get onto your network. But you have to have an endpoint, and I'll back up a second. It usually happens on this guy right here, your router that's either connected to your cable box. If you don't have one, you probably won't have the ability to do it. But that's going to be your best way to block that. So, and that's good. If you're able to recognize those, then that means you're a little bit ahead of the game. So the next thing is trying to figure out what kind of device or process you can do to block those. And if you have any questions on that, we can probably help you. Anything else?
We have somebody that asked if you can hide your router and only allow your devices.
You can, in a wireless scenario, you can hide your network. In other words, I don't know if anyone, I hope it may be familiar. I'm kind of stammering around trying not to be technical here, but you can actually stop your wireless access point from broadcasting your wireless network ID. Sometimes you might hear of it be called an SSID. Some networks have the ability to do, their routers, have the ability to turn off the broadcast of the SSID. So that means, let's say you get a new laptop and you go home and you're ready to join it to your wireless network, you're going to have to tell it what the name of your network is, spell it out, and then log into it. But that does conceal it. But again, it's not foolproof because there are scanners out there that will try to search for unnamed networks. But that'll at least get you a little bit ahead of the game. Anything else, Courtney?
No.
All right, well, let's move on. So, let's talk real quickly. One of the big reasons for a concern on these smart devices and these webcams and security cams is who can access these devices and from where. So, one thing that has been growing in popularity over the last year or 2 years are these little Ring doorbells. Everybody loves those because they get all kinds of fun videos of people sneaking up on their porches and falling down or whatever, but then also seeing porch pirates stealing your Amazon shipments and so forth. But you got to be really careful on some of these, especially ones that may not be from, I won't say reputable, but people from manufacturers that aren't necessarily mainstream. I'll give you an example. There's a number of these cameras that you can see that say, hey, these are so easy to install. You plug them in. There's a little bitty square box on the back that's called a QR code that you take a picture of it with your phone. It automatically downloads and installs software, and within 10 minutes, with doing nothing but just plugging this in and taking this picture and installing the software, you're able to see what's on that camera. It's amazing, but it's also really scary, because we've read some articles. We've actually bought a couple of these to play with them. And in fact, I use a couple of them at home, but I'll tell you what I did so I feel safe using them. These cameras actually phone home to China, and your video is streamed through their server, and then you access that with your phones through their server in China. So you've opened the door. If it's going into that server and talking back and forth, they literally have access. What I did is I, of course, changed all the username and passwords, but then I, on my firewall at home, have blocked any outbound data from that camera to China. And I actually have a video server at home that this camera talks to. That's awfully complicated, right? Probably better off going to a security company. You know, there's lots of companies, even here in town, that offer home security, Night Watch, Electromech. A lot of these people have same kind of cameras, but they have their little servers. Oftentimes, my feeling is because you can doesn't mean you should. And even if it's easy to go buy something and you say, well, it's just a camera, it's real simple, the potential there is for you to open up a back door to someone who shouldn't have access to your network. But that's a good example. Webcams, these home security cameras, all can pose challenges. So let's look at what you use to connect from home. You have a PC and a laptop, or a laptop. Monitors, you know, 1, 2, 3 or more. Just depends on how much desktop space and what do you use. Printer and a scanner. Office phone. Some of our guys actually have some of the same phones they use at their desk at the office, or excuse me, at their home office for them to do the work. Other times they just use a soft phone app to connect back into our Mitel system. Webcams for collaborating, and speakers. A lot of stuff. Each one of these on their own don't really provide any security issues, but just trying to point out some of the things and the multitude of devices and peripherals that are connected, and they're all using your home network in one way or another. So now let's move on and say, okay, we've got all these devices. We haven't even talked about why we have them, and they're basically for using your network. I skipped one. So the applications is really the key here. We're sitting at home working. We've got our bookkeepers working at home. We're owners working from home. We've got all of our staff working from home. Everybody has different job functions, whether they're just performing accounting, banking. We all use our collaboration tools to talk. We use our voice over IP to communicate to our customers. We're using Microsoft Office. Depending on what your industry is, you're using some type of line of business app, whether it's a credit union account app or whether you're in the insurance industry, real estate. I mean, most of the apps that are used today find themselves being hosted in some form or another. Antivirus and anti-malware. You know, I've been asked, why is that? Why do we care what kind of antivirus is on our home PCs? Because we're talking about work, right? Well, you know, this is where I wish I had we had two-way cameras, or we were sitting in a room together, because by show of hands, and just bear with me here, how many of you have antivirus installed on your PCs at home, and how many are, again, rhetorical, how many are using it commercially where they bought it, or is it just like Windows Defender or AVG or something you downloaded from free because somebody said, oh, this is all you'll ever need at home? Now we find ourselves working from home and we're thinking, man, are we really getting that level of protection that we need? So my advice would be, check with your company and say, hey, this is the AV that I'm running at home, and I'm going to be working at home, accessing all of this work product. Is this sufficient? Does it meet your risk mitigation framework? Fancy word for just phrase for just saying, hey, are you comfortable with me using a computer that this is the only level of protection I have? Oftentimes what we've seen is some of our clients are extending the management umbrella out to their users at home, paying additional for having antivirus, anti-malware that's managed and monitored. It just really depends on what their risk position is on that. So you really need to check on that, because just because your company has a good solid AV and anti-malware foundation at the office doesn't automatically extend out to your desktop. So we need to check on that. Data protection and data backup software for your home PCs. This really kind of boils down to, do you have files that you keep and store on your local PC to do work and send it back to the office? If you do, then how much work do you do at home before you update that back at the office? So there's a lot of, and I'm probably posing more questions than more answers for you today, but this is kind of a thought-provoking discussion, because everybody is different. There is not going to be one specific, okay, you all need to have this kind of data backup software at home. If you're just working on things at home, but via shared and cloud-based resources, that might not be as big of an issue, but we're going to talk about the cloud part of it on our next slide. So, but this again, be thinking in terms of, if you're using QuickBooks or some kind of accounting software at home for your own personal finances, you really should be thinking about backing up your local PC somehow, periodically, just in case something happens. And it's very, I won't say very likely, but there's always a potential that you could even get ransomware at home. It doesn't just attack businesses. They don't pick and choose. They're going to find anybody that they can try to infect. I mean, every time you get the phone call from Microsoft technical support or Apple support telling you that your credentials have been compromised, those folks are wanting access to your PC, because anytime they can gain access to something is just one step closer to getting to the prize. We have some questions.
No, George is taking care of that one offline.
Oh, okay, very good, very good. Okay, so let's move on. We're gonna get into one of the biggies here that is really, ties in with these applications that we see. Okay, so everybody, I won't say everybody, but we're seeing a growing number of people that are using Office 365, especially since the beginning of our pandemic, because of the shared resources and the collaboration abilities and things like that. QuickBooks is another very popular online sharing accounting software. Adobe Cloud, we see that more in kind of the artistic world, but also we see it because of people using Adobe Acrobat and sharing some of those resources. And of course, Microsoft Teams, which is very popular. We love it, using Teams to collaborate. It has really kept us going. And then of course, Zoom is something that we hear about every time we turn around, that somebody's been using Zoom. But again, they even discovered that they had a lot of vulnerabilities that they've been rushing and fixing. And of course, it's like any other application that people try to use for good. There's conversely the bad guys out there trying to use it for bad and for orneriness. So it's just one of those applications like everything else. We need to know how to use it. We need to know how to protect it and know where it's best to be used. So let's talk a little bit about cloud storage. Look at all of these different apps that I'm sure everybody has heard of a bunch of them, with the exception of maybe SugarSync. But you have Google Drive, OneDrive, Box, Dropbox, iCloud, Amazon Web Services, which is just Amazon's drive sharing software along with a myriad of other things that they offer. Google Docs. And people are going, well, you got Google Drive. You're just trying to fill in the slide on Google Docs. They actually have two separate uses, the same as Microsoft Teams and OneDrive. Some are intended more for personal use. Some are more for business or what we refer to enterprise use. But the one common thing that almost all of these have, along with sharing resources, is those resources themselves, which are pictures, contacts, files, documents, music. Basically, your whole life can be wrapped up in these. And that's your whole life, whether it's personal or whether it's commercial. Sometimes it's so blended, you just don't really know the difference. But the important thing is, where are your files? A lot of these applications have the ability, because they are syncing to the cloud. They're not just cloud-based where you access them through a browser. You can actually put little clients on the drives and have those files copied or synchronized to your device so you can work on them locally. And then every time you save it, it's uploaded back to the cloud. Kind of cool. Couple problems. First of all, is that, and I can speak from experience, I may have a PC at home, I have a PC at work. In fact, I have two PCs at home. I have a laptop that I carry when I travel. All of them have Google Drive, they have OneDrive, they all have, and they have Teams. So if I update a file, which is really handy for me because I just feel like I've got to have access to them everywhere, is that I make a change on a drive at home. I'm working on the notes for this presentation. I don't copy them to a thumb drive and carry them into Office. They're already synced into the Office. The downside to that is should I not have very good security at home, and my antivirus on my machine at home is a freebie, and I somehow get infected, that infected file gets synced to my Google Drive, and then what happens? It gets synchronized out to all my other devices. That should give everybody a moment for pause, because depending on how that virus works, it could do it all in the background. And you not even know it until the next time you get into the office or you try to go into those files and discover that you can't open them. I can give you a real world example. I belong to an international peer group of technical companies. And 6 months ago, we use a file sync for our files within this peer group among thousands and thousands of users around the world. And they had a flaw in their system, and unfortunately we didn't get impacted by it, but there was about 200 or 300 other companies that started to notice some of their files they couldn't open, and they discovered that one user had ransomware and it somehow made it into this cloud-based service, and next thing you know, they started getting files encrypted. So since then, we've gone to two-factor authentication, all kinds of other extra preventions. But one thing that we did here at LammTech, there's 3 of us that participate in this group, is that we no longer have the syncing client on our PC. If we need to upload a file, we use the browser and upload it. If we need to download files from there, we download them, but we've effectively disconnected ourselves from that. That's important. That's how important and how serious that we take it, and how important and serious we suggest our clients take them as well. The next thing, which ties right into it, is who has access. If you're sharing this, this folder full of files with 1,000 people, that's 1,000 possibilities that someone can infect a file. So you need to think about that because these are all meant for good, but again, every time you find something that's meant for good, somebody tries to use it for bad. And so we want to just make sure that we find a balance between convenience and safety. So kind of a repeat on how do we access these files. You just need to know You need to understand, because you can't determine your risk unless you know how these files are being synchronized. You know, do you have it automatically synced to your device, or you do it on demand? Are you doing it to multiple devices? So then you need to know, okay, if I'm going to 5 different PCs, are all those devices secure? And then decide whether you really need to have a sync client. You know, now if you're working with people here at your office and you're syncing files with them, sure, maybe real time is good. But if you're working with people outside of your organization, you may want to reconsider it. The final step, and I think this is a real key component, because we talk about ransomware. We've been talking about ransomware for a couple years now, and one thing has never changed. The only defense against ransomware is a pristine 100% good backup. Now, if you've got a file server at your office and you've got that, if you're a client of ours and we've got you under our BDR agreement, those backups are happening every 15 minutes. We're very confident that we're going to be able to restore a file, you know, within a particular window of opportunity. We'll be able to restore those files. And that's if it's in your building and it is backed up and housed in your office. Well, let me ask you this. Have you considered how are your files in the cloud being backed up? Who are you relying on for that? You know, Google, Dropbox, OneDrive, most of these companies will say, yes, we're doing backups, but have you ever said, well, how do I, you know, what if I find a file that I want to restore? It's not that easy. Sometimes you can't do it. Every one of them has different levels of this. Some of them you have to pay extra if you want to have what's called versioning, so you can go back and get different ones. So you need to know, if you're using any of these services, how they're being backed up. That's why we try to define or provide clarity between what's a personal device, or personal storage versus enterprise or company/business storage. So bringing us to that of how do we protect all of these resources. So we're going to try to cover in these next 6 minutes. We might go a little fast, we might go a little long too. So the first thing on protecting the resources is seeing who accesses them. If you discover that your password has been breached, then you need to change your passwords. But we're trying to avoid unauthorized access, theft of data, and equally as bad, ransomware. So again, your best backup options are specialized backup services designed for cloud storage. We have a couple vendors that we use. This is not a sales presentation, but I do want to make you aware of this. And it's not one of those ones that, how do I keep you in suspense? I'll tell you tomorrow kind of joke. We use a product, is it Datto? Doug? Okay, so it's a solution that we sell that also works locally, but also works with cloud storage, including Office 365 and things like that. We also have a cloud security option that scans and interfaces with Office 365 and Microsoft OneDrive, because again, a lot of the big vulnerabilities and hacks that we're seeing are people or criminals that are hacking into Office 365 accounts, and then once they are in there, they're able to do all kinds of very bad things, mail forwarding rules. You hear about people who are transferring money to the wrong place because they got an email that says, hey, the address has changed. The way that happens is that a criminal will crack into, let's say, the accounting manager's email, and they'll watch the emails for a while just to see what kind of information is going back and forth. A story that I think takes it all home was we had we knew of another partner of ours in this peer group that had a real estate company that not once but twice had some checks for over $100,000 diverted because their bookkeeper had their account hacked. They did not know it. They were trading emails with a home buyer, and they were given an address on where to mail their check for this transaction. And what they did is they let the first email go out saying, "Hey, it closed. Mr. Buyer, thanks for this. Here's the address to send the check or the payment." And then because the criminals were watching this real time and knew they had a fish on the line, they fired out another email just a couple hours later saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We've changed such and such. Please send the check to this address instead." The buyer did that. The check was cashed. These people were gone. So this is real-time stuff. And there's so many stories like this, which is why we take this so serious. And the difficulty is that for us is that trying to create a value proposition so prospects and existing customers are seeing an extra fee for something. They're like, "Gosh, that's another," and don't quote me. It's another $3, $4, $5, $6 a user per month. It may not be that much. I don't get into pricing. They just bring me in to talk about this stuff. But they're thinking to themselves, yet nobody, me as a business owner as well, don't like to see another incremental monthly cost. But it's kind of like insurance. And if you go out and you buy a shiny new car, you're going to pay more insurance than you are for one that's 6 years old. Every time we add on a layer of technology or new features become available or new threats surface, we have to try to add something in, another layer of protection to do that. And unfortunately, that does come at a cost. But when you look at the alternative to seeing funds being diverted, identities being stolen, so many bad things that can happen because people have access to your email and to your files, it makes a little bit more sense to try to figure out how to budget for that. And that's our main message for this meeting is we need to consider everything that we have. I mean, look over to the right hand of your screen and look at all these moving components that you have and all the things that you do in your daily business. Everything revolves around, for the most part, passwords. And the biggest complaint we get from users is, "I hate to have so many passwords and I hate to try to change them. If I have to change my password on every account that I have every 60 or 90 days, I'm going to go bonkers." And I understand that. And so if you are forced to do that, then what's the next natural thing you do? You write them down. You either record them in an Excel spreadsheet, or you have a notes file in your Outlook folder, or old school, you may have just a spiral binder that you just scratch them out. Oops, sorry. That was my timer telling me my time's up, but I'm going to ignore it for just a little bit longer. In that, there's ways now that we can secure your passwords and do it relatively inexpensively. It does take a little bit of training, and there is, I won't say enforcement, but I say management oversight, that if you're going to do this, you need to have all your users doing it. And I can assure you that once you start using it, you'll go, "Gosh, why did I not do this before?" I've used this product, and it's called LastPass, LastPass. Doug can talk to you more about it. But I use it, and all my personal and business passwords are in here. The best part of it is when I have to change a password, every place that you use a password handles it a little bit differently. So it's not a 100% easy thing to do, but especially things that are like web-based, like your online banking, my banking, for example. When I get that password notice to change, I can simply right-click, tell it to select a new password. It generates a big, long, random password and saves it, and I don't have to do anything. I couldn't even tell you what a lot of my passwords are anymore because it's all saved in LastPass. It works on and it saves those passwords in a secure app on my iPhone. I believe it also works with Android, but it also works on your PCs, your tablets, your iPad. I've used it on my iPad, and it's just really a nice product, but I feel so much more comfortable using it because of that. And in fact, I'm going to suggest to our marketing guys that maybe we have a webinar just simply devoted to LastPass to show you how it works. If you're interested in something like that, why don't you send an email to Courtney or Doug, or if you want to just respond back in the chat session here, we'll kind of keep a list, and if there's enough interest, we'll see if we can put something like that together. But in a nutshell, to wrap things up, because I want to be respectful of your time, and also if there are any other questions, is that this has become such a big topic, and it's very broad. And as you can tell, I've kind of tried to pull back and not go too deep on any one thing, which makes me feel kind of bad because we've had a 40-minute conversation on something that literally could be an entire day. But who has time for that, right? But we need to make time. So what I would like for you to do is when we get this video posted back, maybe give it a listen back through it, get some more questions, call in and talk to the folks here. That's what we're here for. But we really feel strongly about this topic because typically most of the issues that we encounter today are security related, backup related, user app related. Hardware and devices, that stuff's it's fixed under warranty. It's all software. It's all applications. It's all how you back up your data and how you secure your data. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Doug and see if you have any other questions. I'm going to hang around here for a little bit longer and see what we can do. But thanks again for tuning in. We're very passionate about this. It's something that we really want to spend some time with you on, and there is no question that is too simple. So please feel free to call in. We won't call anybody out, so don't worry about that. So Doug, back to you.
Well, I see a lot of comments and questions up on our board, and that's good to see them there. See if Courtney can pass along some of those. You touched on this one a little bit. It goes back to your home environment, but if you did do some work from a home PC, what kind of exposure does the company have if the home PC is actually compromised?
Well, it kind of depends on the compromise. But let's say, for example, the most, I won't say most common, but the one that seems to resonate with everybody. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but in the old days, and it's one of those old tried but true technologies, but if you get a keylogger virus or malware that happens to get placed on your computer, what a keylogger does is it just that. It records every stroke that you put on your type into your keyboard. So consequently, let's say that you're logged into a terminal server or a secure session at your office, and you think, I'm secure. I've got a VPN. I've got all these antivirus. I'm all golden. But if that keylogger happened to slip onto your computer, it does two things. One, it tries to watch what's on your screen or where you're going, but it also records all of your keystrokes. So if you're prompted with a username and password to your bank, You type in your username, doug@lamtech.com, and then you get to your password and you type in a password. Now, the banks have gotten a little bit smart about that because most banks, if you are logging in, and I'll use Central Bank as an example, you also get a list of words, and you have to select the word that also goes along with that. The keylogger won't catch that because it's just a mouse click. And that's one way that they're using to try to defeat people using keyloggers. But how many other places other than banks do you just simply type in your username and your password? And so consequently, Amazon, even Google, so many of these places, that's all you use. Now, folks like Google have recognized that, yeah, that is an issue. Now they're incorporating something else called two-factor authentication. And so they'll say, well, we're going to send you a text message, and that's going to have a 6-digit code in it that's only going to work for 10 minutes. So when you go in and put your username and password, then it sends you a text message and you have to put that code in. So that's what two-factor authentication is in a very simplified explanation. So the reality is that if your computer gets compromised at home, there's a very good probability that that could extend into your network.
Another question stems from your email portion of things. And if you're using that family computer, does that email store on the computer? Does it store in the cloud? How are people accessing your email, and where does that email actually get stored on?
Very good question. And I'll answer it very ambiguously. Sure. It depends. If you're using something like Office 365 and you're using it as just the web, in other words, going into a browser, then the email and everything is typically in the cloud. But if you're using Microsoft Outlook on your desktop, but you're still accessing it, chances are, and very probable, that those emails are still on your PC at home as well. And so where the challenge comes in, and then also where it gets complicated, is that let's say you have a shared family PC. Because it's kind of quirky and doesn't always work the best, generally no one puts a username and password on the family PC. It's wide open spaces. So let's say you've got your email installed, or your Outlook installed at home, and you can get your email just by opening up Outlook. Well, one of your kids come in and they open up Outlook, they've got Outlook open just like you do. So they could send and receive and do whatever. Which typically I'm not too worried about that, but the reality of it is let's say the kids come in and they play a game, an online game or something that happens to be something that bad actors are using to slip stuff back onto your PC, because everybody is logged into that same default desktop. It's going to be right there, and then the keyloggers, everything else can go right to town on it.
Do we have any other questions, Courtney?
We don't. We're right up on the 11 o'clock hour.
Okay,
sure. Well, we do appreciate your time. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. We appreciate your time today to learn about the latest in working securely from home with our owner and CEO, Robert Lamm. If you're a current client, you want to see how what you learned pertains to your agreement, feel free to reach out after the webinar. If you're wanting to learn more about LammTech and our offerings, you can call me directly. The number is up there, 660-851-7342, or you can email me at doug@lammtech.com. Please remember, we do provide you with a link to this webinar and invite you to also view our previous webinars online at lammtech.com. Again, thank you.